Inside, no. Inside, no. Inside is a puzzle platformer developed by Playdead and released in 2016 as the sequel to the indie breakout Limbo. Spiritual sequel, of course. And it's important to realize that Limbo was a true trailblazer for the indie breakout. Right alongside The Binding of Isaac, Braid, and Cave Story, Limbo was a critical darling, largely responsible for making indie gaming mainstream. So, can Playdead do it again? And aren't 2D platformers kind of boring old news? Well, before we start to explore all that, please help the channel grow by engaging. Hitting that like button is quick and super easy. I am always active in the comments if you want to talk with me, and a sub to this channel would be absolutely amazing. And if you look at my stats, I don't have a lot of people subscribed that are watching this content, so I know you're out there. I've got exciting content coming up. Use the timestamp chapters to check out the end of the video to see what my next review is. And with that out of the way, let's dissect this tiny 3-hour experience and see just what Playdead wanted to show the gaming community. Most puzzle platformers have a strong, agile, playable character. So, it's certainly interesting that the protagonist, we'll call him Boy, doesn't. Well, look so great for someone who's in a puzzle platformer. Pal, your gate ain't looking so good. But Inside expects a lot out of this youngster. He is put through a torture test of platforming and puzzle solving. Where some platformers emphasize one over the other, Inside is happy to have you executing tightly timed narrow escapes 1 minute and dragging around crates to find a new path the next. The constant back and forth between puzzles and jumping keeps you on your toes, and nothing overstays its welcome for too long. After spending 10 minutes on a tricky puzzle, a welcome set-piece escape is a nice break of pace. Speaking of nothing overstaying its welcome, Inside frequently throws new ideas at you. You might be mind-controlling folks in the background, piloting a submarine, or I came in like a wrecking ball. And where Inside largely succeeds in these occasional gimmicky ideas is gradual building on them. You experience an idea, you take a break from it, then it might return with a twist an hour later. And this gradual crescendo, building, mixing, and melting of new mechanics with old and familiar ones is great game design, and it is a huge success for Inside. And it all feels pretty solid to execute. Responsive controls are made all the better with excellent animations from the boy. The joystick is used intuitively and contextually to execute tasks, flicking it back and forth to remove debris, lifting it up to open a hatch, spinning it to operate a crank. Of course, none of this is new per se, but it is some of the better execution I have personally seen with Inside. And I think the idea to keep the game brief works in the favor of Inside. We'll talk more later on the brevity of the game, but a 3-hour experience consistently provides and builds on fresh ideas, never letting anything get stale, and executes them at a consistently high quality. And that's a smart move for a small team looking to provide a high budget experience with a smaller budget. And finishing this 3-hour journey really is just the start. The rest of Inside takes place, well, inside you. Your mind. There is a lot to chew on once you complete the main and alternate ending to Inside. The devs clearly have a message for the player, and while I'm sure I did not hit on everything, I'd like to explore a bit of what I took from the experience while spoiling as little as possible. Disagree or think differently, like I said in the beginning, hit me up in the comments. There is a lot of dystopic shit Inside reminds you of. 1984, Battle Royale, The Hunger Games. You probably caught on just by watching the B-roll of this review. No real surprise here. Things become a bit more perturbing when the lines between fiction and reality are blurred. There are images which suggest the game takes place in a post-World War II era in terms of terminology. There are some VCR tapes, for example, but I just can't help get a World War II vibe from this game. It's all very analog, if that makes any sense. Anyways, the experiments at times that you see eerily come close to some documented Nazi experimentation, specifically the hypothermia experiments where people are kept underwater, bone, muscle, and nerve growth transplant experiments, and experiments done on twins. The parallels to both real and fictional works acted to help pull together my overall thoughts on the game, its themes, and the actors at play in the game. And in general, I think Inside is challenging corporate culture, government overreach, capitalism, and how all of these forces rob you of your time and ultimately of your life. In the game, you control, and yeah, I was originally going to play control, people with a helmet device. And I see this as outside influences controlling you on the inside. Why do you work insane hours for that company you hate that's ruining the earth, and maybe even humanity itself? Because, well, you need to, or you'll die. Effectively, your free will has been sapped from you. Of course, you don't want to work for $7.25 an hour at Wendy's, but there isn't much of an alternative sometimes, is there? The helmet you use to control people later breaks during a time when you are tasked to free 20 mind-controlled individuals. And as you free them, they sort of follow you, and they hoist you up like they're king. And I kind of see this helmet as, well, a crown. And these people are clearly dressed as workers that you have liberated. And something else that follows you around the game. Literally every single animal, except those that are mind-controlled. The fish underwater, they'll follow you around. The chicks on the farm, they'll follow you happily. They all follow you freely, except the dogs, who are controlled, forced to do, well, fucked up shit, because they don't have a choice. And the pigs who on the farm who are controlled, well, I'm just gonna let this moment sit with you for a second. Mamma mia! And speaking of the farm, I can't help but feel that this is a nod to Orwell's Animal Farm, which critiques the gradual corruption of the Soviet Union, but can easily be extended out to applying to any governing body. Eventually, there will be overreach. A well-intentioned forefathers establishing rule of law eventually becomes lost in meaning over time, corrupted and perverted by the few in power. The few in power control the many, and that is expressly shown in Inside. There are people in cages, there's mind control, and there's violence used to subdue the masses. So why do we work? More specifically, why do we subject ourselves to jobs we don't want? Who controls us? Do we have free will, or are we forced to act in accordance to the will of those in power? And I think the alternate ending in particular tackles this question, and to me, those are the core themes and questions the games present. But there is plenty more to dissect about this game. I've read a decently compelling piece about how this game is about cancer. There is an interesting use of color in the game, which I'm still inclined to think largely revolves around game design, but there could be some solid color theory if someone decided to dive a little bit deeper. And I think there is more to be thought about in terms of you playing as a boy. Now, this is a little bit tricky because playdead seems to just like to use young boys as playable characters, but I do think that there is a potential for significance. For example, the boy could represent your transition from free will childhood into worker drone for those in power. Lots more to think about, which is why I think Inside largely succeeds as a powerful piece of gaming. Your 3-hour journey is really just the start into this experience, and the messages delivered are illustrated uniquely using the power of video games. So games are increasingly getting bigger. There's more systems, there's larger spaces, and there's deeper stories. There is an ever-present push to keep games getting bigger. Activision says it has 3,000 people working on Call of Duty right now. Inside was made by a few dozen people, and Inside is frankly a critical darling, even going as far as winning several Game of the Year awards. So why does this short game made by a small team so successful? Why is minimalism flying in the face of these $500+ million video games? The cynical answer is money. COD, FIFA, even Halo Infinite, they are all glorified slot machines. The goal isn't to make a good game or even a fun game. It's to make money.
The global network of capital essential essentially functions to separate the worker from the means of production.
The marketing, the graphics, the sound design, the effects, the challenges, the season passes, the manpower is going into hooking you into buying those fucking cat ears. The less cynical answer, of course, is that Inside is just simply a piece of art. There's no bullshit gameplay padding. There's no killing aliens or Nazis because that's conflict-free. An ambiguous ending and a story where not everything works out and not everything is black and white. Inside is video games as art. No crap holding the concept back. And that is why Inside can be the David that topples these multi-billion-dollar Goliaths. And I live a short distance from the Philadelphia Museum of Art. They have an amazing Impressionist section, and now I'd like Impressionist art. After 5 p.m. on Fridays, it's pay what you want, so I find myself there from time to time. And I highly recommend that if you're ever in Philadelphia, even just for the night or a few hours, and it happens to be a Friday after 5 p.m., pay what you want, get into the Museum of Art. Even if you only have an hour just to pop into the Impressionist section, just beeline it there. And you'll spend some time hanging out there, checking out the Van Gogh and the Monet. And you'll see sunflowers, they can be a little bit ambiguous. You're not going to be able to find cat ears on the water lily pond. And Path to the Island of St. Martin was not made by 3,000 people. So I've had this game sitting in my Steam library since 2016. I had plans to do a big retro review this month. Instead, this is a review of Inside. Contracting the novel coronavirus kind of forced me to reduce my scope this month. And in short, I'm glad I did. Inside is everything it needs to be and nothing more. Does it revolutionize gaming? No. Honestly, it doesn't really do anything new. But where Inside does execute, it executes for the player. It does not waste your time. It does not waste your money. And it creates a beautiful, memorable experience. I don't think this is the greatest game of all time or anything like that, but I do think Inside is extremely reverent towards the medium of gaming. And I think a lot of games could take some notes from how such a simple, well-executed idea can have such an impact on players and critics alike. Short, well-executed platformer that doesn't let its ideas overstay their welcome. Instead of being bogged down in gameplay mechanics, Inside would rather whisk you away on a journey, show itself to the player, have its messages and themes laid out bare, and just let it stick. When you finish your 3-hour journey with Inside, you've basically hit the halfway point. The rest of the experience is meant to be chewed on in your mind, and chew you will. Inside is a great video game worth experiencing.